Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today is Nadja Pass. She is from Denmark, among a host of other people from Denmark who I think I'm destined to go to and spend time in Denmark because of all these people that I've been introduced to over the last decade. So, welcome, Nadja. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and I think I know what I want us to talk about, but I'm gonna wait to hear what you how you describe yourself because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, well, that is always a challenge actually to figure out what to call myself because I'm such a conundrum of many different ways of going around the world. But I think at this point I've narrowed it down to saying that I'm a civic designer and a salonnière. Yeah, and I don't know if that explains anything at all. But a civic designer is that I try to like whenever I see something in society or the world that I think could be better, I try to set out on journeys to try and figure out if I could create some kind of a solution to to offer the world for us to do things in a different way. And the salonnière part is inspired by the olden salonnières who would gather luminaries for interesting evenings of conversations and inspiration and cross-pollination. And I try to do that in well, a modern way. Um, yeah, so those are like the two main
That's
things that I do.
that's interesting. So, is a more maybe a simpler description is that you're a social catalyst,
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hmm.
and you like to bring people together.
Yes. I like to bring people together who have very different perspectives and ages and beliefs
Yeah.
and fields and then like inspiring them to share their perspectives and then learn from each other to hopefully like foster cross-pollination.
And I totally understand because that's a lot of what I do, and that's really the premise behind the podcast is to act as a social catalyst and building a network of networks where people come to know one another and they say, well, I heard him on the or heard her on the Eddie network. I think I'd like to contact her. I mean, that's what happens.
Hmm. Okay, I consider myself
I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, this is within the last month. Um, a young woman in her mid 20s reached out to me on LinkedIn and told me that she had been watching some of the episodes. She's a young Polish woman living in London, had been watching some of the episodes um, with Wilkins, Andy Wilkins,
Mhm.
and he's a futurist in the healthcare and education sector and works for the Imperial College of London. And she said she was so taken by the conversation we had that she's enrolled in his program.
Wow.
So that sort of thing is possible. I mean, and that sort of thing probably is happening with you, that people are finding avenues to go do things or become the kind of people they want to be because of these civic engagements that you're creating.
Well, I hope so. That's definitely whenever somebody comes up to me and they shares a story like that and they say that somehow they found their own path and got the courage to pursue it, that that really makes me happy and it really inspires me to go on even when it's sometimes hard to keep it up. That's really like the meaning of it all. To have to learn that people have gotten truly inspired and have not only been thinking about the changes that they want to do, but have also actually done them. Yeah.
What do you, I have a lot of questions, and the easiest question would be, how do you do this? I want to get to that later. I'm curious as to what you find are the impediments or the obstacles for people to discover what you're trying to present to them?
The obstacles for them to understand what I'm doing, or
Well,
oh,
to discover something about themselves that they are discovering when they become a part of what you're doing. I mean,
hmm,
it's revealing something within them because it's a social environment, and social environments tend to open up people
yeah.
to possibilities or whatever it may be. So I'm curious as to what you find as the obstacles to this sort of thing that actually makes what you do very even more important because of what you're doing.
So this is a great question, really, truly, and I've never been asked this before, which I love because that's actually kind of the essence of what I'm doing.
I
That is that
understand.
I'm
I
also
do.
trying to ask people questions that they haven't thought of exactly that way before. And when you pose me this question, that I can feel everything inside of my brain tick and try to figure out how to answer it, which is exactly like that is definitely one of the things that I try to do is pose questions that people haven't thought about that way before, because very often when we are even with wonderful great people around us all curious about each other, we tend to still ask the same pretty boring and predictable questions,
Mhm.
which makes most of us just repeat the stuff that we've said 1,000 times before, which is kind of boring for us, but it's actually also kind of boring to listen to. So asking questions that make people think in new ways is definitely part of it. But there's more to the question that you're posing here, which is which is
Well, let me
which
ask
is
you.
we
Let
could
me
talk
ask you
about this
this.
for okay, yeah.
Let
Huh?
me pose it this way. It seems that people are willing to settle for something which has an appeal, but it doesn't take them far enough down the road to say
Yes.
fulfillment or flourishing or whatever the terminology would be. And this is particularly true in environments where people are actually working together, organizations or communities, that sort of thing. And they settle for something less than what is best for them.
Yes, and I think that because that's the second and probably more important part of the main question that you asked. It's also a matter of the way that we are together with other
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
which is interestingly, we tend to hold each other back quite a bit, so that we don't really share what's on our minds. And that's like you're saying right now with colleagues and people that we work with. But sadly, it's often also with our friends and loved ones that we tend to have this idea of who each other are and what we're probably gonna answer. And we kind of like hold each other like kind of we stick to that idea of who this person is, and sometimes it can be really hard to 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 uh, to explore something new and also a new way of being. And that's why the whole idea of bringing people together who are not necessarily strangers, but who don't already know each other really well, it 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 makes us it sometimes makes us, which is scary and strange, but it sometimes makes us more honest. And I remember like I used to travel a lot, especially when I was younger. And sometimes I am just reminiscing about like that strange guy I met on a train in India, and we would just have this like super intense conversation for
Hmm.
3 hours. And some of the honesty that came out of that was also it was not just because we wanted to share stuff, but it was also for not like already having a fixed idea of who each other were, and then also knowing that we would split up right after this conversation. So it was sort of like a free, open space for us to explore thoughts and ideas together. And I think that that has been a big inspiration for a lot of the conversation salons that I host, that the whole idea of having this like this container of respectful divergence and curiosity and listening openly to each other that I really wanted to recreate as much as it's possible. So that's definitely a big inspiration. And then there's also the whole idea of if we know too much about each other, strangely, we tend to off our ears. And then, like, if we know about somebody's political opinion or whatever, and we disagree with it, it's just like we don't listen to what they're actually saying, which is sad because if we were more open to listening to what made them think this or have this idea of the way the world should be, sometimes we could actually be inspired, or we could at least get an idea of their their ways of perceiving the world, and then finding solutions that might connect us in a different way. So there are a lot of obstacles in the ways that we are usually together, and there's also just, I don't know if it's being timid or shy, but it's also people, even if they are curious and they have great questions, they somehow don't really ask each other if they don't have like the frame of being at a salon or using a conversation card or being invited for a podcast like this. And I even myself find it hard sometimes to even if I have lots of great questions at hand, simply because the social setting around conversations isn't it can seem a little provocative if you ask too much of an interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I find it's really fascinating that the people that we're the closest to, we share the least with.
Yes.
Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? I mean, your friend on the train in India it speaks to that idea that Mark Granovetter had of the strength of weak ties. That's where our networks really flourish is because of people we hardly know, but there's one little touch point that we have with them, and we turn to them because we trust them because of that one little piece. But the people that we
Yeah.
know really well, like our family or our you know the relatives and stuff, it's more difficult, and I think it's one of those unanswered questions that we should be talking more about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so interesting because I usually like my favorite way of doing this is like getting strangers or relative strangers together. But sometimes it's people who know each other. And even if people have been married for 25 years, they'll be like, we never had this conversation before, or I never knew this about you before. And sometimes you're like, clearly nobody asked, or you didn't feel comfortable enough to share it, or what happened in that relationship that made you not share this before there was this
I
yeah.
I had a interview just the other day with Christian Miller, who's a philosopher here at
Hmm.
Wake Forest University, and he's written a book called The Honesty Crisis. And one of the things we were talking about was how people lie to one another in families. And the question is, why do people lie to the people that supposedly are the people that love them the most? And one of the answers to that is, well, we want to protect them from hurt or harm or something like that. But we're willing to be very, very vocal and very to the point with people we don't know very well. It's one of those curious things about human nature that I don't think anyone has figured out yet.
Yeah, but I think that when it's with people that you live with or whatever, like there's also a lot more at stake, right? Like if you might be more afraid that if they find out who I really am, or that I actually changed a lot during the past 25 years since we got to know each other or whatever, then I mean, there's also more of a risk maybe of all of a sudden for them to realize that
Is
there's
there is it a real risk? Is it a real risk or just the perception of risk?
I think most risks are mainly the perception of risk that keeps us from doing what we want to do. Um, yeah,
So let's talk about the structure of this conversation that you create
yeah,
with
yeah,
and what I'm really curious about this because um, there are people that are talking to me about doing this kind of conversation in a public, open, live event. So, which sounds like this is what you're doing. You're having a live event and you're having people talk to one another at a level that they're not used to talking.
yeah, absolutely.
And so, how do you do that? What's your
Yeah, okay.
methodology? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, okay. Hmm. So this is turning into like it's kind of a long story since I've been doing this like focused for 15 years at this point.
We
So
have
of
all
course it
day.
has
We
also
have all day.
evolved. So it has evolved quite a bit from the beginning, but I should probably start at the beginning, which is creating this idea of conversation salons along with an anthropologist called Andreas Lloyd, and basically both of us were longing to have interesting conversations with strangers, and having these like semi-public rooms, like very Habermas style, actually, of people getting together. And we were like, it's, there's so few places that we do that. And within those 15 years that have passed since then, it has just become worse and worse because there are getting fewer and fewer places where we connect in the cities and wherever, where we actually like look people in the eyes and fall into conversation. And I'm actually just back from Washington, D.C., and it felt actually soothing to be back in the States, because you still have so much of that like politeness and openness when it comes to saying, how are you? Which compared to the state of public life in Denmark, I was just like, wow, it really it just feels really good that you're still acknowledging that here is another person coming towards me, which sadly I think here everybody is just like looking into their phones and shutting out every sound with their headphones. So there's something there where you still have some of that like infrastructure more intact in the States than we do here. But even so, getting from how are you to the deep dive into to actual conversations is still really hard, I think. And what Andreas and I set out to do was to create a lot of like techniques that would make strangers fall into to deep conversations. And the original format was 2 hours where we would have created, say, 4 or 5 different formats within those 2 hours so that all of the guests would get to talk to, say, 5 or 6 different guests. Some conversations would be really short, just like for a warm up, and some would be more like half an hour, just two people diving into a conversation menu. And then I think the whole trick of that, and actually to our surprise, because we were really curious to see how it would work, but the whole trick was for the host or hostess or salonnière, as I would call it, to actually be surprisingly firm in giving directions, posing questions, and posing those questions in a way that were surprising to the participants, so that you would start off somewhere that you might never have started off a conversation before,
Mhm.
and 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 then making sure to mix people around, like having sometimes a very basic system, just saying whoever was born in a year with an even number go to the left and the rest go to the right, and then find a conversation partner. That would be the easiest, most basic part. And then yeah, and then most of the time making pretty sure that people were just talking together in pairs, because that's also quite important because we tend to have like these bigger groups, and it's actually much harder to enter into to speak what's on your mind. Whereas when you're two people, it's more like a tango. Both need to participate and both need to sort of like
Hmm.
um, respond to what the other one is doing. Whereas when you're in a bigger group, it's really confusing to figure out who's speaking when and who's speaking too much and too little and when should I cut in and should I cut in. So yeah, so having all of these things actually very inspired by dance. We would yeah, we would call them with dancing metaphors, but having people having these conversational dances around questions that they would probably never have thought about before. Yeah, was the basic.
You're describing why I don't do group podcast
Yeah. Yeah.
because you have the extroverts and you have the introverts, and the extroverts take over because they're comfortable talking, and the introverts are thinking and pondering, and they get kind of pushed aside if they don't have kind of a strong inclination to have their voice heard. So
Yep.
yeah, so that's why I don't. I think I've done less than five in 360 some odd episodes because for that reason. And people still say, "Oh, I think y'all do group things. I think groups are great." I said, "No, not on Zoom. Not Zoom is not a good place for groups. I don't think. I think this is really where Zoom succeeds well."
Yes, I agree. And when I do virtual salons, which I do sometimes, then the actual conversations are always in breakout rooms with two people, like now, because then it works really well. And I think you can get a surprising don't know if intimacy is the right word, but like
Yeah.
you can get a surprising level of connectivity going on like across an ocean and but when it's but then yeah, so I would do the introductions in the plenary and then split people up into to the yeah
Well,
to the smaller breakout rooms. Yeah.
I'm not interested in a superficial conversation, even with someone I'm just meeting. I want to go as deep as quickly as possible because there's something inherent in that person. There's something inherent in you that's worth knowing. And if we're only going to have about 45 minutes to an hour together, I want to get there as fast as I can. I mean, that's why I asked that first question. That
Yeah.
came out of the blue. I mean, it was just I think I'll ask this. I mean, it
Yeah.
was all this is unscripted because I'm listening and I want to know who you are. Um, so I, I'm curious. I mean, you're doing this all over I'm assuming you're doing this all over the world, or what?
Yeah, it is getting
What's
pretty
your
worldwide.
tell tell me how this is now. How are you utilizing this now as the work that you do as a person? Is
um
that is that a clear? That's not very clear. What what are you doing today, this year, where this is the kind of the principal thing that you're up to? How does
yeah.
that get translated into a life of work that you're doing?
Yeah. So as for the conversation salons, because I'm still doing variations of that. I never repeat myself 100%. That
Oh yeah,
never works for
good.
me.
I like it.
I always do different tweaks. But for the conversation salons, that has, to my surprise, this wasn't the plan at all, but it has turned into a great way of living as well because various museums and ministries and organizations. Surprise, all needed for people to get together and have other conversations that they usually had. So I have been doing a lot of work also for like the Danish government and all kinds of different settings and situations where I've been helping people to approach maybe kind of difficult situations, or just this is also great for innovation work because before diving into the actual creation process, it can be really nice to explore other surprising ideas. But right now, if we fast forward to what I'm mainly doing now, I created this deck of conversation cards, which was actually during COVID, because I got so frustrated with everybody. Like we couldn't be together, but once we were together, the conversations were all about, vaccines and how to cover your mouth and all that. And I was like, this is also a great opportunity to rethink the world and the way we do things. Why don't we talk about that? So I created this deck of conversation cards where I wasn't needed as the salonnière, but people could do it at home with whoever they were locked up with. And having the conversations cards like that proved proved to work in a different way that I also really like. Like I love to host still, but I also like it that people can just do it whenever, wherever, and in the way that they want to do it. And I think that what happened now is that we also created this international deck of conversation cards that is also turned into a big exhibition where each card is like blown up to 2 meters high, and we set them up sort of like a maze and call it it's called Concopia, and the exhibition is called the Concopian Chamber of Wonders, and having people enter there and just like fall into conversations about the different ideas and questions that we show, or just stand there and ponder for a really long time is just fascinating. And what I'm working on right now is that it will be displayed at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in Washington, D.C. in September and October. So I'm going there to also host a lot of conversation salons and um, design laboratories and stuff there. Yeah.
Is this like, I mean, what you're going to do at the MLK Jr. Center, is that like an exhibit, like an art installation type of, but it's an active, it's an engaged art installation sort of thing?
Yeah, sort of thing. Yeah. Yes.
And you're gonna be there to do this for 2 months.
Yes. And so I mean it can stand on its own, and I don't need to be there because it's also like when people enter they just explore on their own. But then we will also be hosting quite a few hosted sessions with various formats where like getting people together, inspiring them to have conversations within the installation. But the installation definitely also works with nobody hosting it. It's yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not far from Washington, so I'll try to come up and participate.
Please do. That would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love that because, to me, um, the thing that's been missing at the most basic level is respectful conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I've worked with enough organizations over my lifetime to see that the lack of respect is a serious issue. And it's not that people want to treat people with disrespect. It's that their response to the way they're treated oftentimes is to recognize that they're not respected. And there's some really great subtleties to that. But what I have found is that the structures of organizations in particular, but you can expand that to structures of communities, is really organized around how transactional all our relationships have become. And
Yeah.
the transaction is, what am I getting out of this? What are you going to do for me? And whether it's the company or it's the local government or it's some other agency, it's that I was talking with some fellows this morning, and I said, it's basically that we have found a way to make selfishness the central ethic of our world today.
Oh,
I'm going to do what
yeah.
I want to do because this is what I want to do, and I want you to bow to me in that sense and give me what I want. I mean, that's an extreme version of that, but I think in another sense that we don't. But when you have quality, really quality conversations, what happens is that the individuals give up their right to be right or their right to tell their story and instead become very curious about who is this other person. I want to find out who this person is because when I see that person for who she is in this case, I am uplifted, I'm elevated because oh my, this is I have had the privilege of meeting this person who is an extraordinary person. And I didn't know that she existed until, what is it, 30
A
minutes
few
ago.
days ago. Yeah.
So I think that that's this shift that you are working, I'm working to try to build the rapport that is needed for a healthier society.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way of putting it. And I really like, and this might sound weird as a response to what you're saying, but I really like that you haven't already put down the questions that you want to ask because that's an example of wanting to actually listen and not having so going back to what you just said, not having your like focus like very like uh just to the
The
point all
script.
the time and yeah and so it's and I really think that sometimes when I host these things, not all the time, but sometimes I ask people to just do listening rounds and not comment on what each other are saying, just for the heck of it. And
Uh-huh.
it's just so interesting to see what happens because that's another very like selfish thing that a lot of people tend to when they listen. They don't really listen. They only think about what they're going to say next. That might be even smarter or more clever or that beats the story that somebody just told. But if you take that element out of it and you simply ask people to listen and then grab the next different cards that you couldn't prepare for my answer is going to be this very brilliant thing, then they just sit and they focus. And it's so interesting to see like I love to see people's eyes when they are truly listening to what somebody else is saying. They just that's this they you see the how deep the conversation is looking well even if it's not a conversation but there's so much going inside on still inside of your head that's really interesting and then what I've also noticed is that listening to the people who share who are speaking whatever they say as the first response to a question is interesting. It's always interesting, but the most interesting part comes after like the second or third, fourth wave of actually thinking about and pondering this question. But that only comes out when you're not interrupted, because usually you would have been interrupted much earlier. And that's actually once I realized that, it made me so sad because I was like, that's the most people get of each other is that first like initial spontaneous response. And it's nice, but it's not actually like what's truly on your mind because you haven't had the chance to really think about it. So the selfishness in coming back to your point, the selfishness in and in being very focused on like what do I need to get out of this or now get to the point much faster and like the whole acceleration that has been going on in society for the past well 15
There are
years
several generations. Yeah.
for several generations but
Yeah.
certainly within my lifetime like
Yeah.
also accelerating yeah it's just like sometimes I think like really losing out on the idea of what a great conversation is all about because it's not, I mean, once you've been in it, you'll always know how much it lit you up and inspired you in a lot of ways, but it's sometimes just the idea of having to get to a certain goal with this conversation or getting something out of whoever you're talking with, it sort of like blocks the way of having that truly great conversation. And yeah, so I think that we really do need to take that selfishness out of the, yeah, out of the, yeah.
Um, do How do I'm really interested in structures, both
Yes.
organizational structures and social structures, because I think those are the things that actually define who we are. It's not my choice of values. It's not my choice of people that I want to be around. It's really I'm obliged to take on the value system and the social cultural practices of the society I'm in and the organizations I'm a part of. And if those are not healthy, and many of them aren't, then we find ourselves not being healthy. And but we all know it. And I'm gonna tell you something that I think is leading to a question. So one of the things I have found as a consultant, as an organizational consultant, is that there's this split that happens in organizations between upper management and the people. And sometimes the upper management is really doing great and the people are not very healthy. And then sometimes it's the reverse. But what I have found is that in many of these places, this is the language that I use, there is a persistent residual culture of values that persist because it resides in the relationships of the people. So the need for conversation, the need for respectful, open conversation is how we build communities within organizations where there's shared values and there's a shared commitment to what they're about. And then I'm thinking about one organization that I did some work for. The upper management was really not good at all. They were really extraordinarily bad leaders, and they had put the company in jeopardy. And it's a very large company. And I was doing a work for a segment of that company, and I was introduced to a woman who was an executive assistant. And what I saw in her, in just the little bit of time I had, was that she loved this company. And I realized that there were a lot of people in this company that had worked there for a long time and they loved the company. And then I realized that the company was kind of defined by who this person was, or this person as the representation of a collective of people who work at the company, who love the company, who give their best, and who are operating off of a value system that had not been established by upper management, but had been decided by themselves. And so I see what you're doing as a way of injecting into that kind of scenario, that kind of social structure, a way for the people who share that kind of sense of community to deepen it and enrich the way they operate together. And I see that that's something that's really needed in organizations today, particularly as they're going through a tremendous amount of upheaval because of AI and people being let go and then being hired back, but they're not hired back. It's a very chaotic in time. And so all the more reason that we need to build the kinds of lines of communication and conversation that allow people to feel a sense of togetherness, like a sense of support, of safety, things like that.
Absolutely. How beautifully put. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are you seeing that in your work, you get invited into those kinds of scenarios, those kinds of situations?
Yes. In a lot of different ways and with a lot of different challenges. And sometimes it's really sometimes it's really for people to meet and connect on a different level than they would usually do, just having a normal meeting, and then share to get ideas and hear about each other's backgrounds, because that also like sparks innovation in different ways. I'm very one of the reasons Concopia is called Concopia is that the whole idea of copia within rhetorics is like our inner libraries and all of the stuff that we carry around. That was the stuff that great conversations used to be made of, and I really want to re-inspire us to share that. And I think we have stopped doing that quite a bit. So sometimes I wouldn't say it's only about having that, because I think that's actually really, really important. So only sounds wrong, but sometimes it's basically just that. And then there are the more complex situations that you're mentioning right now. And yes, I also hear and see a lot of people where there's a new, well, I don't know if it's a new kind of loneliness, but there's certainly an existential kind of loneliness coming from a lot of the things that you were just mentioning, that actually talking to others about that and sharing your thoughts, and realizing that it resonates with others and others also have these challenges. Already that seems to also like boost a little bit of agency, or I really like to work with the civic desires as well, like to see how can we evoke the civic desires that make us engage in society and make changes. And when you feel all alone with your ideas, you can be very it can be really hard to just like get started. But then when you start to realize that you're not alone and there are others who might have faced the same challenges or would like to work on the same ideas, then you get much more, you get motivated to get started on things. And then also quite basically, I'm also quite often being hired to get people to talk together and explore each other's realities. That might be like different teams who work in the same organization, but they have no idea what each other are doing. And then once they have these conversations about like what's important for us and why is it that we do it this way, that everybody else has been like, why are they doing it this way? All of a sudden they get to understand each other. Or sometimes I'm doing stuff where it would be politicians talking to citizens, talking to people from like the administration, so that they get an idea of like, okay, so we want to make this change, or we want to make this happen, but for some reason it doesn't happen. Why is that? And then when you share and you get the ideas of each other's realities and perspectives, all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is where that idea gets blocked, not because the idea was wrong, but because of some strange, odd reason. Yeah.
So we're really talking about the social dynamics that are going on
Yeah.
that become the inhibiting factor. We're coming back to where we began, that these social dynamics become an obstacle to actually having the kinds of conversations we're both desiring to see happen. Okay, so we're recognizing this. Let's
Yeah.
say someone is watching. Let's hope somebody's watching. Someone's watching this and they are hearing something that they've never heard before, and they want to, they feel like they need to address it in their own work, their own
Hmm.
business. And maybe it's just a little retail shop, or maybe it's a corporation. Who knows? Maybe it's an agency within a state government. Whatever it may be, but they recognize that you're saying something that is touching a reality that they're experiencing. It's an existential reality that they want to address. So
Hmm.
what is it? What is your recommendation for someone that is hearing this and says, I need to do something about this"?
That is also a great question.
Well,
Um,
I'm asking this question because maybe they're going to contact you and ask for your help. I mean, that's kind of that's one of the things that lies behind it. But you can't help everybody in the world. So I mean, you're one person.
yeah,
You got your own little scurry, your own organization. But what we're talking about is something that could be happening on a very broad scale. And
yeah,
that's where I'm going with that.
yeah. So, okay, there are many possible answers to this question, but I think the first starting point is to start talking about it and sharing your thoughts. And what has always worked for me, but that's because I really, really like to write. I have always been writing about the stuff that was on my mind and have had great experiences with people that it resonated with them, whatever I'd been writing, and that they would contact me on like, and that's all with the way back to when I was 15 years old. I won this an essay contest that the Danish Ministry of Education had posted, and that poem that I wrote there, like so many people responded to that, and this was before email and all this stuff, so it was like mail like arriving, and I was 15 years old, and I think like looking back, it has been very formative for me because I realized at that point that something that I shared as a 15 years old resonated with a lot of adult people who were like, wow, and that gave me a lot of strength or belief that if I did share what was on my mind, something great would come of it. And that was also what happened when I created Civic Desire, which is this laboratory for civic design. That I as a citizen felt frustrated about the way that I was not really doing anything, even if I wanted to be a more active part of society. And then when I started talking about it, it just turned out many other people felt the same way. And I was really surprised because I thought I was the only one. And this has happened several times before, also with the conversation salons. This was Andreas and I longing to have better conversations. It was a personal longing. Sharing it, it turned out many other people felt the same way. So that is that was that's probably my main advice, that you shouldn't be so afraid to share the things that are truly on your mind and then figure out. For me, writing is usually the best way, but for others, it might be speaking about it. It's become so much easier to find some kind of a media where you or create some kind of media where you
What
put
what
it
I
out there.
what I see as a possibility in doing that is that people take this video, the YouTube video, and send it to people that they want to have a deeper conversation with. And we're introducing to them the idea that their conversations could have deeper meaning than what they're having. And
True.
I see, I mean, this is why I do what I'm doing, is so that people have gain a sense of awareness of what is possible for their lives and for their organizations and their communities. And I think what you're doing is really um, it's blazing a trail into an unknown world.
I, I would hope so, but yeah,
Do you feel that
but
way? I mean, do you feel like I mean, what I mean that by that is that you've responded to something that you saw or felt or experienced or didn't experience, and you have been addressing that in a very specific way, and you're having very positive response to that, and and so that's where I'm going with this, is that here's someone who is decided to make this kind of level of conversation variously scheduled, variously organized as a central feature of her life, and that the person watching, you can do this too. You can change your life by the way you have conversations with people. You can change your organization. You can change your community. You can change your family simply by how you have a conversation with one another. And you're providing a way for that to happen.
I hope so. I think and I have certainly put a lot of effort into everything we've done has been with the Creative Commons license so that
Uh-huh.
others could build on it. And we also published like a handbook making it easier for other people to also host their own salons, like with all of our tools and stuff, because it's always been more important for us to, yeah, like you say, help and inspire others to do it their way, and also yeah, so it's actually been really inspiring for the past 15 years to see the ways that others have taken up the same idea and then put all of the stuff that they know and are good at into it that we didn't know or would have thought of. So in that way, it's we are also learning a lot from watching that. But I definitely think that the whole idea of trying to pass on the things that you learn or the techniques that you create and develop for it to be as easy for others as possible to build on it is really important. And I think that's yeah, so that's also kind of what keeps me going the other way around, because I get really inspired from hearing what other people have done. And yeah, so it's kind of like what goes around comes around in a really nice way.
Okay, I want to ask you my last question, and I often ask this of my guests. Um, and I think I know your answer, but I want to hear you. So, do you have a hope for the future? And if so, where do you find that hope?
Ooh. So Nadja actually means hope.
Oh, is that
So
right?
yeah. And I think that in a lot of ways that has that's very ingrained in my whole way of being in the world, because I
I know.
contradicting what people think about me, I tend to actually see a lot of things that I'm really frustrated about or afraid of and stuff, but I tend to have this like hope thing come up. Like it's sort of like my inspiration that I'm like, no, I cannot let the world turn out that way. So I need to do whatever is mine to do to change it. So it's very hope is very ingrained in me.
Okay.
But my hope for the future, I hope that I hope that as many people as possible find it in them to figure out what is theirs to do to try and make the world just a little bit better. Um, and I'm actually extremely open-minded when it comes to what that could be, because the whole beauty of it is that if only we all figure out like what is important for us and what is our great personal skill that we could put into this, then together, I think we could make a lot of things happen. And I think that the problem right now is that it becomes so overwhelming for a lot of people to figure out what to do, and then they end up doing nothing, and that's the worst thing that can
Yeah.
happen. So trying to inspire as many as possible to do just a little bit, then together that becomes a lot. And that's actually like with the Concopia cards, it's they mix the very grand perspectives of the world and how we could change the world and reimagine the world, and then tiny little things that we can each change or do in our everyday life. And I think that combination is super important, because if we only talk about the grand perspectives that are truly important, then it becomes really hard to figure out like what can I, just a tiny little person, do. But when you mix in all of those ideas of stuff that the micro actions that we can each do, it tends to also bring people a lot of hope. And that's probably, I think that's one of the reasons why when people exit a conversation salon or a Concopian game, they tend, like, the cheeks tend to be like very red, like almost like you've fallen in love. And some of it is from just seeing these other people and truly connecting with them, but some of it is also having that sense of agency emerging in you that that makes you believe that yeah, that it's not like hope is not a strategy, but hope is a great inspiration for trying to get things done and get things started.
Well, I have hope because there are people like you in the world.
Oh,
And I'm
thank you.
and I get the privilege of talking with them here. And so thank you for what you're doing. And I'm sure that there's more touch points for us to talk about, and we'll talk about after we're done here. But I just want to commend you for kind of blazing a trail forward in an arena. I mean, let me come back and say it this way. One of the things I came out of COVID very disturbed by what I was seeing, and then all of a sudden, what I saw was this explosion of conversation groups that were starting on Zoom, and I thought, and I joined a number of them, and was very taken with them and enjoyed them very much. And I didn't stay with all of them, because some of them kind of reach a point of very kind of comfortable with this is where we're going to be, and and I'm always wanting to move forward. Okay, where are we going next? Where are we going next? But what I found was that there is this deep desire for conversation and connection, and the question is, where do we go beyond that? What does it look like if we not just focus on connection, but we focus on relationship?
Yeah.
And I'm still asking that question. I don't have a real answer to that at this point, but I see that that's the next stage in this, and that as things become more chaotic and complex, that our relationships to one another are going to become more important, because that's where we're going to find safety and security and stability and constancy and a sense of belonging that we will have lost because of the great, huge social and technological and institutional changes that we're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, it's also important to keep on prompting human intelligence, right? And I think that's one of the things that
Oh, yeah.
we truly do in conversations, that because it's unpredictable what the other one is gonna say or do, and then you need to respond and to think about stuff that you might not have thought about for a really long time and
Yeah.
rearrange it in yeah. And I think that is really, really important to keep on doing in a time where things tend to otherwise become very predictable and safe. So it should still be a safe environment to share your thoughts, and you should not feel scared about that. But it shouldn't be safe in the way that you know exactly what's coming right after. Yeah.
Right. I agree. Well, Nadja, thank you for being here, and thank you for what you're doing. And I look forward to meeting you in person this fall in Washington at this event that you're doing. Um, and to all of you who are watching, recognize that, you know, she just started something. She just took the initiative, and you could take the initiative. And it may be that you're just going to call someone up and say, "Hey, let's go get coffee," and you don't have any questions. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but let's talk about something. What have you done this morning that is interesting? Something like that. That's all it takes. It's all it takes is to begin a conversation that is worth having. So go do that and let us know how it works for you. And I thank you for watching the Eddie Network podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.